This is an epic and inspirational blockbuster that no one will refuse to watch. The film is based on the true story of the historical Battle of Thermopylae. A mere 300 warriors faced an enemy army of 300,000 without sophisticated equipment. They used only their shields, flesh, and blood to defend their country and never retreated. They fought brutally for 3 days and nights, repeatedly forcing back the enemy's repeated attacks, and their will was harder than steel.
This is where we fight!
The muscles of their bodies reflect their killing in glory. Every brave Spartan warrior is trained like a demon. From the birth of a baby, they are severely screened. If they were small, weak, or disabled, they were discarded. When a child can stand, it begins to undergo brutal training. Even though they suffer, they can't complain a word. As a qualified warrior, the greatest honor is defending the country and dying on the battlefield. When a child reaches the age of 7, he must leave his mother's arms. They will be forced to go to the wilderness at 30 degrees below zero to fight the wolf. They can only use their wits and willpower to overcome all kinds of danger. Ultimately, if they can last the longest and come back alive, they will become the Spartan king who is admired by all. On this day, an unexpected guest came to Sparta. A messenger from the Persian Empire came with a string of skulls to demonstrate. He threatened the king to submit to the Persian emperor and give up his land, and insulted his wife in front of the king. Out of courtesy, the king suppressed his anger, but the messenger still continues to provoke. How could the Spartan king tolerate such humiliation? The king showed the Spartan attitude through his actions, but this kick attracted 100,000 troops of the Persian emperor. The Spartan warriors had no fear in the face of their enemies, but according to the laws of the Spartan state, even the king had no right to send troops to go to war. The council and the priests had to agree, but these counselors had already been bought by the Persians with money and had corrupted their conscience. They did not even consider that women and children were about to become enslaved and found all kinds of excuses to oppose sending troops. For the sake of his country, he could only send troops to war. The king privately gathered 300 of his toughest warriors and prepared to resist the 300,000-strong army of the Persian emperor. Immediately, the council came to a stop to this move, but the king told them that these warriors were his guards. As the king of a country, could he not take 300 guards out of the city for hunting? Everyone knew that there would be no return from this expedition, but in front of the 300 warriors, there was not a trace of fear or retreat. This spirit of fearlessness infected the miscellaneous troops of the neighboring countries halfway. They also wanted to join the team and get a share of the glory. The king knew at first glance that these men were either blacksmiths or shoeshiners. If the king brings them to war is simply to send them to death in vain. The king told them our warriors could defeat 100 men at a time. At that moment, an ugly-looking dwarf also wanted to volunteer to fight. The king was so impressed by his courageous spirit that he let him try to raise his shield before he was considered for the Spartan army. He couldn't lift the shield with all his might. In desperation, the king could only refuse him ruthlessly. Little did he know that this compassionate rejection would allow the dwarf to sow the seeds of hatred. This would be the key factor that would lead to their final defeat. When night fell, they came to a village and found it slaughtered and looted by the Persian army, and they hung all the bodies on the branches of the trees as a threat. At this sight, all the Spartan warriors became even more furious. A huge Persian army came in boats, the sky was thundering, and the wind and waves were so strong that many Persian ships were overturned. The king also arrived at Thermopylae with 300 warriors amid the storm. Spartan warriors choose to defend in easy-to-defend places. Suddenly, the earth began to shake violently. All eyes looked into the distance as the Persian army poured in. The battle was about to begin.
This is where we fight!
And the enemy leader came to negotiate with great vigor. Before he could speak, his body, pierced by a spear, fell off the horse. The sound of trumpets resounded throughout Thermopylae. The battle was about to begin. Spartan warriors used their heavy shields to resist the enemy's charge. They overwhelmed the enemy step by step with absolute strength. Every time the enemy stepped forward, they opened their shields and attacked. The Spartans were warriors who had fought with wild animals since childhood. They were able to withstand 10 strong enemies, and they pushed the enemy to the brink of extinction along the way. The Spartan warriors raised their shields and pushed all the remaining enemies off the cliff. When everyone was celebrating the victory with high arms, a rain of arrows came from the sky. The battle had only just begun.
Cocktail!
They didn't have time to breathe a sigh of relief. the Persian emperor sent a second wave of cavalry to attack them. The soldiers once again took up their shields and stood at attention. They formed a triangular formation, defending instead of attacking. Each warrior wore an undaunted look and waited for the enemy to arrive. In the face of the enemy's arrival, they used their swords to attack the horses' legs, catching the Persian army's iron horse riders by surprise. In a few rounds, the Persian iron horse was all routed. After 2 waves of attacks, none of the Spartan warriors were killed or wounded. In cleaning up the battlefield, they also do not forget to kill the surviving enemies. The Persian emperor seriously underestimated the strength of the Spartan warriors. To reduce casualties, he put himself down and came to negotiate with the king himself. He promised that if the king kneeled and submitted to him, he would keep you prosperous. He underestimated the pride of the Spartan warriors. There is no such word as submission in the Spartan dictionary. The king taunted the Persian emperor with his words, which immediately angered the Persian emperor's heart. He spoke to the king and said that he would raze Sparta to the ground. After the king returned to Thermopylae, the warriors cleaned up the battlefield. They built a high wall of Persian corpses. This high wall was prepared for the bitter battle tonight. As night fell, the Persians sent their undead legions, who claimed to be invincible, to the high wall. At the king's command, the 300 warriors behind him pushed down the wall from the rear. In one fell swoop, the leader of the undead legion was buried alive, giving the enemy a good show. No enemy cannot be killed in front of Sparta. Their crushing momentum immediately defeated the undead legion. Seeing that the situation was not good, the undead legion unleashed the savage giants. The savage giant was so powerful that the king did not even feel the pain when his sword pierced his arm. The giant pushed the king to the ground and rubbed him. The king stabbed a dagger from the ground into the giant's eye. As the giant screamed his heart out, the king took the opportunity to cut off his head. Then the warriors who had ambushed him in the narrow tunnel took advantage of the situation and entered. The 2 armies attacked and defeated the undead army. The scene before him enraged the Persian emperor, who vowed to send an even fiercer force to destroy all the Spartan warriors. The Persian emperor sent a coven of sorcerers to fire bombs at the Spartan warriors, although this could cause some damage, but they never expected that one of the 300 warriors would rush to the wizard's front with the shield in hand. He jumped and cut off the head of the sorcerer leader. The explosives in the leader's hand detonated all the bombs behind him. The sorcerer's legion was wiped out in a splendid display of smoke and fire. The Persian emperor, humiliated, sent the fiercest barbarians and ironclad rhinoceroses of Asia to attack again, but these animals were no threat to the Spartan warriors. They were turned into corpses before reaching the front of the line. The Persian emperor then gathered a herd of war elephants and launched another attack on Sparta, but 2 clumsy elephants stepping on the ground on the corpse kept slipping. Spartan warriors used the momentum to push all the elephants into the cliff. The Persian emperor stopped his attack because there were too many casualties. Tonight a man from the Persian camp suddenly came to join. This man was the dwarf the Spartan king had rejected to fight some time ago. His arrival instantly gave the Persian emperor hope. Tempted by the Persians' money and beauty, he betrayed his country. He told the Persian emperor that there was a shepherd's path on Thermopylae. By bypassing Thermopylae, they could be attacked from the rear. At this time, the Spartan king was regrouping his troops for the next battle. Suddenly the cavalry of the neighboring kingdom brought bad news. The secret of the shepherd's path has been leaked to the enemy by a traitor. No surprise, everyone will be surrounded by the enemy tomorrow morning. Without the geographical advantage, Sparta has no chance of winning. Thermopylae is about to fall. Now it was either retreat, surrender, or death. But even then, the king would not retreat. Retreat and surrender are not words in the Spartan dictionary. To die on the battlefield was the only honor for the 300 warriors. For the sake of their country and freedom, they were willing to die. After stabilizing the army, the king found the warrior with the wounded eye and spoke to him alone. He told him to go back and tell the others a story in passionate words, a legend of 300 warriors who died gloriously fighting for their country to wake up those puppets blinded by money. The next morning, under the leadership of the dwarf, the elite troops of the Persian emperor arrived at the shepherd's path. The archers of the Persian army surrounded the Spartan army. The dwarf did not want to see his country's warriors brutally killed. He came forward and tried to persuade the king to surrender. The king put down harsh words and also wished him a long life. At this moment, the Persian emperor sat on his throne and sent messengers to persuade him to surrender. If they kneeled and submitted to the Persian emperor, all of them could live. The king showed an angry look. After thinking for a moment, he removed his helmet, threw away his shield, and put down his spear. Then he knelt on his knees in front of the Persian emperor, but there was not the slightest humiliation on his face. There was only anger and murder in his eyes. At the king's command, a man rushed out of the shield and stepped on the king's back as a springboard. He pierced directly through the body of the messenger. The king did this to make his opponent let down his guard. He lowered his helmet to get a better view of the target in the distance. The heavy shield would make him lose his balance. He took off the burden of his body to save up for the final, fatal blow. The sharp spear cut through the corner of the Persian emperor's mouth. The last blow did not succeed in killing the Persian emperor. This also meant that all 300 warriors were about to be wiped out. Soon all the warriors were killed by the Persian army with a hail of arrows. The captain who resisted stubbornly was pierced directly by the spear. While dying, he still managed to kill the enemy with his last breath. As he fell, he grabbed the king's hand and said, The wounded king rose to his feet. He looked up at the sky with tears in his eyes and let out a long sigh. Then he spread his arms and was killed by the enemy's arrows. The 300 Spartan warriors were proud of their defeat. Unfortunately, they were only a short distance away from victory, but with their sacrifice, they awakened the politicians corrupted by money. The warrior with the wounded eye returned to his country. He spread the tragic battle of Thermopylae to every corner of Sparta. This strong will and spirit of never backing down awakened everyone. The Spartan counselors finally agreed to send troops. 30,000 Greek allies prepared to march again and defend their country to the death. After the sacrifice of 300 warriors, they can win the next final battle. Finally, I thank my fans for their long-term support, and you can leave your comments in the comments section if you want to see any movie,